Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome to The Cutting Room. The Content Studio presents The Cutting Room live. This is a live show where we have experts from content marketing come on and show you their behind-the-scenes process, pregame, and philosophy as it relates to content marketing. And then in the first half of the show, that's what we'll be talking about. And then in the second half of the show, we'll actually be editing an article live. So you can peer over their shoulders and see their whole thought process as they're going through a piece line by line. We won't be able to get through the full article. However, you will get enough value out of this by seeing everything that this person does as they go through the piece. My guest today, and I'm very excited about this, is my dear friend Aaron Orendorff. Aaron was my successor at Shopify Plus. He was the editor-in-chief over there. He is currently the VP of Marketing over at Common Thread Collective, and he has written for almost every single site you can imagine. So Forbes, Inc., Business Insider, like all of them, and culminating in the New York Times is the crowning achievement over there. I'm going to bring Aaron on to the show, and we're going to just jump right in. Aaron, come on. All right. What's happening, Aaron? Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Oh, I've been looking forward to this. I've been looking forward to this. Thank you for the wonderful introduction as well.
Yeah, no problem. Me too. So, Aaron, why don't you tell us, before we jump in, I'm going to start by asking you about your content marketing philosophy, the role that it plays within an organization, and all of that. But before we do that, tell me a little bit about Common Thread Collective.
Common Thread Collective is an e-commerce growth agency specializing in direct-to-consumer channels, paid media across social and search, into retention, email, and SMS, as well as a lot of forecasting and data analytics that we now run through a proprietary software we are inches away from launching called Statless. So we're a full meal deal. And that's what Common Thread Collective is.
Fantastic. And what's the average customer that you guys are working with? What's your average client look like?
You know, our ideal client, and actually, this is a really good question. This is one of those, like, let's just get right into it kind of things. Because if I'm being really honest, and what the hell, I'll just be really honest with you, Tommy, I don't have a good answer to that. That is one of the 2022 goals, is Perfect. To have a good answer to that. I've literally got, jobs to be done. Fantastic book, fantastic methodology. I've read a lot about it in other avenues, and I've just realized my content, my marketing strategy is bereft of that. Now, typically what we would say is 2 million to 50 million. And what that really means is 5 million to 50 million or 75 million and above for like the enterprise level clients. Because there's sort of this spot in between those two where a lot of people have figured out the game when they're at the 50 to 75 million dollar range. That's where a lot of people turn in-house. And so we find that those two far extremes are where we do the most good.
Beautiful. All right. So here we go. Tell me a little bit about your content marketing philosophy. What's the role that content plays within an organization? And how do you feel like good content can affect an entire business and change an industry? Because we've both done this, which is very exciting about that.
As a subset of marketing, content marketing exists, and it's sine qua non, right? The thing without which it ceases to be. Its essence, its fundamental foundation is it has to exist to drive growth. Measurable revenue growth through leading indicators, because content, especially in the B2B space where you're not selling a sign up here and get a free trial and we can then knock out the rest of the funnel based on how many people do. If you're selling any sort of service or large scale, high price point, B2B SaaS or technology, which is Shopify Plus, where you and I were at, as well as Common Thread Collective on the service side of things. Those leading indicators are like, we've got to be able to map the funnel and know what our end result is. And then marketing and content, period, exists to drive that growth, to fuel that engine, which means I pledge a lot. I pledge my allegiance, and my team, my department does likewise, to things like SQLs, right? Sales qualified leads. And we back up one step from that in the funnel to MQLs. How many people sign up, marketing qualified leads, that are actually associated with somebody who sells a product online. We can back that up a step in the funnel to leads and back that up a step in the funnel to traffic. And everything either flows down or up the funnel like that. So that when I'm thinking about content, I'm typically thinking about what are we creating at the top of the funnel, but it has to have justification to fuel and push everybody else down the funnel, the right people. So that's like the big picture philosophical reason. And it really is like, is a difference. There's different houses, right? There's different like theories of content. And I think this is one of the reasons you and I really, really enjoyed working with you, because you kind of have this more, I would say like readerly community audience purpose. And I'm just like, get the money. That's what I'm about. And so there's room for each of those, but that's how I approach it.
Yeah, it is funny because we have very opposite approaches. I wouldn't say opposite approaches, but we have certainly complementary approaches when it relates to this, because you're very search driven as it relates to that, and I'm actually kind of the opposite. I'm like the anti-search person in a way. I mean, you drive more results than I do, let's be real, but it's very much from my standpoint, like how can you create this emotional experience for the reader? How can you get those this content to lift itself off the page and really like get people to want to share it and build in these sharing mechanisms? Whereas you've done a really solid job at like taking content and getting it to rank and all that. And before we continue, right, before we go on, I would love it if anyone who's watching right now, please go ahead in the chat and just introduce yourself, say who you are, link to your website, and feel free to do a little bit of self-promotion. And then if anybody has any questions for Aaron as we're going along, also please feel free to do that. Please just ask any questions inside the chat, and we'll also be doing tweetables down here at the bottom. So you'll be able to tweet directly from the chat. All right, cool. So yeah, let's talk about that approach, because you actually balance it very well, the SEO side of things and the storytelling element of things to drive those results. I would love to hear more about that, because you have a very rare ability there.
I hope I balance it. Now, I default that bifurcation between what we might call the science and the art of content. So I default to the science side of things. Numerical, analytical, growth-driven, and maybe just how I'm built, long-form SEO-driven content. Right? That's like at least been the cornerstone pillar principles that have driven the most success on my long-form SEO-driven content. The way I used to describe it, I can't remember. I don't know if you remember this, but it was kind of like, now this is very grandiose. If Tommy and I were the Beatles, right? With like right the hook, it's got to be radio friendly. We got to get airtime. People have to notice it and tune in. And then you always need your John Lennon next to Paul McCartney with like "I Am the Walrus." You know, you need some art in there to keep the other person honest and not just from completely selling out. So I'll default to the science side of things, but what I think makes me different, or at least what really makes great content, is you can actually be better, I think, than most people if you simply care about telling the truth and doing that SEO stuff. You really can do like the old school skyscraper technique, really good use, keyword density, the right structures with your headline, with the URL, with your subheadings throughout, like do the research. You can do that. And if all you do is something that really is a conglomerate and it's easy to navigate, scan. One of the things Tracy Wallace used to talk about was being the chief researcher, I think is the phrase that she used when she was at BigCommerce, because it's an act of kindness to say, like, you've got people who are looking for answers and they are busy actually running their businesses in e-commerce. And so if I can be the chief researcher, say, here's everything you could need in one place. And I'm going to link out to it all. I'm going to make it a little bit prettier than the other places. I'm going to brand it and have really like high quality aesthetics. But if I can simply do that for someone, that's a gift. And you can rank by doing that and serve people. So even doing that will separate you from the pack. But then that one level up is the artistic side of it, where it's like, what's the boy, the hook, the problem. I talk about it, and I don't do this in the outline I'm about to show, but I'll often talk about the hell and the heaven, like the theology.
Talk about that a little bit more. Let's dig into that.
Yeah, this is the R side of it, where if you've ever heard problem, agitation, solution, PAS, this is the classic copywriting formula. And problem is, you state it simply, succinctly. All you want is someone to go, yes, nod. That's a problem. The dark is a scary place to be. Yep, it's scary to be in the dark. Okay, that's the problem. Agitation is, oh, but it's so much worse. And agitation come in the form of statistics. How many people die past dusk compared to the rest of, or the emotional, the hearing the cries from your friends and family, your loved ones, away from the light of the fire. I always use this like caveman illustration, away from the light of the fire. And that's not even the worst of it. Being powerless to help them. The dark is a scary place to be. So we're ratcheting it up either through the numerical implications, why the problem really is much worse, or the emotional implications. And then the solution is, okay, here's the thing I'm going to deliver to you. And I think that's the piece where, like, when we get into it today, that's what I really want to focus on. Like, I spend such an inordinate amount of time on the introduction of a piece to nail that structure down, problem, agitation, solution. And that's such a well-worn trope structure that it's lost a lot of the impact or the punch. So the way that I sort of thought of it for myself, because of my background, is what's the hell I'm trying to save my audience from? What is the visceral, yes, numerical, emotional, what is the nightmare? What is the hell that they are currently experiencing? How do I bring that to life for them? And what's the heaven I want this piece to deliver them unto? So I got like theological on it in my head to make it sound deep. But to hold that, like if that becomes then the anti-point or the anchor point away from just doing all the SEO stuff, to have humanity into it, I think that's where I really I have a special power, like my marketing superpower is bringing those two together. And it happens in the introduction and it happens in the conclusion. Right? And that's why I spend such an inordinate amount of time on those two places.
I love it. And you talk about the classic skyscraper technique, and I want to give you a little bit more credit than that. And I want to kind of talk about this a little bit more. What a lot of us as content marketers will do is the sort of remix everybody's content, right? We're talking about the skyscraper technique. We'll take somebody else's piece of content and, take the best of everybody's stuff and make it a little bit better, right? Incrementally better. And if you can optimize it for better keywords or whatever, have more images, right, then you're going to do well. But what I think you do really well, and maybe you're not going to give yourself enough credit for this, but I want to give you credit for it anyways, is still injecting perspective and personality into these pieces, so it's not just a remix of everybody else's stuff. You're actually bringing out new takes. Tracy she was on the show last time, and she did talk about being the chief research officer. How are you injecting perspective into that and using that perspective to differentiate? And I think this is the part that's important, to differentiate your brand versus the 9 other that are showing up on that search.
The biggest ones for us are like a common thread collective. The traffic machines, just absolutely crap traffic on us, are our industry reports. These are vertically related. So we've done 5 or 6 of them on beauty and cosmetics, health and wellness, pet. Did 2 on fashion, 1 on the statistics and trends, and 1 just on strategies. And then we did another one on home goods. And that is like 70 to, I would say, like 90% just skyscraper. We're going to out-research everybody. And we're going to download more white papers. We're going to consolidate it. We're going to synthesize it better than you. And like the pet one is one of my favorite ones because it works so well. It's right. The pet industry in e-commerce has exploded. And the pandemic, the new work from home culture, or exist at home culture, did nothing but accelerate it. The problem is what all of those big picture growth statistics hide is that unlike retail, where there is a lot of room for independent sellers, online, Amazon, Petco and Chewy have absolutely devoured the vast majority of the new growth. So you've got this whole new wave of people turning online, and this love, like internet is built for animals and pets, and the content plays so well, and yet your back is up against a wall if you're going to carve out a meaningful chunk of that for you and your brand. And so then it's like we want to set, like, this is the opportunity. This is what's really going on behind the scenes of all of these things, is that they're not even legacy, but they're new conglomerates. That's who you are. That's who you're up against. So what are the ways that you can beat them? Is it possible? Well, it's not going to be easy, but there are advantages to being direct to consumer e-commerce, sub 100 million, sub 50 million, what you can do that other people can't do. And that's what we want to like hook somebody with in the introduction, right? So it's like skyscraper. Yes, you're going to get more freaking stats on pets and shopping channels and like what sub niches and, organic pet food versus treats versus the new, apps and physical products for vets and pet care and all these kind of things. But it's like framing that whole thing in the front of like the opportunity and the challenge you didn't even know that you were going up against. You thought it was going to be like the big retailers. No, they're old business already. It's the new breed that's online to go after. So it's that sort of thing of even finding those opportunities inside something where we're just going to give you all the information. Or it's like, one of my favorite freaking examples of this is customer acquisition costs. Customer acquisition costs have skyrocketed for e-commerce and D2C. CPMs, right? The cost to advertise is up. CAC is up. ISO 14.5 just decimated in a lot of ways. Facebook reporting. So when we talk about CAC, like everybody knows it's going up. And you cannot tell somebody in an article, read this, and the heaven you're going to be delivered onto is lower CAC. What we can tell you is, yes, it's bad. It's actually worse than you probably think it is, and it's going to get nothing but worse as more and more legacy enterprises wake up to the value of D2C, and they are pivoting fast. What we can do is walk you through the fundamental structure of why even your own CAC will increase as audience penetration moves further out from early adopters, how your content and creative needs to change because of that, and how you can anticipate that growing CAC and ways to offset it through margin, profitability, lifetime value, and retention, right? So we're not going to fix the problem, but there's ways to address it, especially if you can understand why it happens instead of it just sneaking up on you. And even that sort of like exchange, like I want to capture that on the page, in the YouTube videos. When we do social media on it, I want to have that sort of tone of like, we're not going to lie to you. It's hard. We're not going to fix it, but we can give you guidance towards it.
Right.
And that's really refreshing.
And that's important. Like, my content code and all of that. Like, you don't want to paint idyllic pictures for people. Carrie actually says she did that exact thing for a super small cat toy company and just found a hole in the content and filled it, outranked the big guys, which is really what it comes down to, right? And people talk about, people will talk about search intent, right? And that word has been thrown around as, it's just been thrown around and sort of abused over the years. But if you're really putting yourself into that person's shoes and why they'd be searching for any of this stuff, and then really doing that research, and I'm really interested in looking at that research process that you do, really looking at the research, not that goes into the piece, but the research that surrounds what you're going to do to create the piece. You can find those holes and you jab where people can't operate, right? You just start operating in people's blind spots, because let's be real, like, how many pieces of content have you written that you just totally forgot about, right? And that are just ranking and you're taking it for granted. That's going to be most. The ones I no longer have
Google Analytics. The one I no longer have Google Analytics access to, I have all but forgotten about, unless I'm competing with myself. Like, so I wrote for Shopify for so long, and there's many times I'm literally like, I gotta go like slug it out with not only BigCommerce and et cetera, but like
but
this
me.
Aaron wrote. Yeah, I do. But there's really like, I think the best thing I could say on that front about finding the opportunity is when you do your keyword research, I'm constantly starting with a fundamental seed term. I use SEMrush and ClearScope. Those are my two favorite tools, SEMrush and ClearScope. And then I'm going off of like customer acquisition costs. Okay. That's one seed term. Customer acquisition costs e-commerce, customer acquisition costs Facebook. Like I just want to build out as many as I can and always be looking at what's the volume and what is the estimated CPC, the cost per click, right? Because it's balancing those two. What a lot of people will do, what a lot of organizations will do is they just go after the volume, and then they have like a separate department, paid search, that manages all of the paid Google ad, paid Bing, that sort of thing. And my favorite tactic in the world is like, there's really high intent for a high CPC term, really low volume, which means all of the content teams are sleeping on it. The SEO teams are sleeping on it. They're like, SEM is going to take care of that. Search engine optimization versus search engine marketing. We're going to go pay to grab that term. And I'm like, nah, I'll take it. I'll write a better piece, right? That's more optimized. And that's that sweet spot of like, don't go after just the volume, because that's also indicating intent when there's a high cost per click associated with it.
I love it. We've got about 9 minutes left before we jump into the actual live edit. Not even that. So I'm really excited to learn. We'll show you the hands-on stuff, but tell me a little bit more about that pregame. Like, dive into that a little bit more. Your pregame process, as you're doing the research, not just the keyword research, but also the competitive research, as you're analyzing what you're doing in the piece. Because I know for certain you spend an inordinate amount of time on that research process ahead of time before you even write a word. Tell me a little bit more about that.
For the industry pieces, that is a volume play, and that research it's part and parcel of the actual writing process. So it's not a lot that goes into it beforehand, although we have systematized that process to at least make it faster and more efficient. So if you look at any of our industry pieces, every single one of them, and now it's templatized inside Google Docs when we write an industry report, it's 3 sections: statistics, data, and growth; trends, including always the top 25 D2C brands and the top 25 what we might consider enterprise or legacy brands in whatever that vertical is. And then the third is always strategies, tactics. And inside that, because we have at Common Thread Collective our e-commerce growth formula, growth equation, which is visitors times conversion rate times lifetime value, one set, minus variable costs equals profit, right? We've oriented ourselves around this fundamental formula. So every time we hit the actual tactics, it's like, okay, now let's break that down. Visitors can be divided into organic and paid, primarily paid. Conversion rate, okay, that's going to be collections, product pages, and ads. Lifetime value, that's going to be email and so like it's one of these pieces of like that sort of work happens as we build it over time, and then we solidify it and codify it so that we don't have to do it over and over again. And so then it's just a matter of going out and finding like, okay, we've now in section 2 identified the top 25 D2C brands. We've identified the top 25 legacy brands. I've got 2 amazing lists. I'm going to lean on the first, the D2C e-commerce brands, so that when I hit the strategy section, I'm like, I need 3 product page illustrations of somebody that's doing something cool on a product page. Guess what? I've got a list I can just boom, 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 go to. All right. Did I notice any of the things? Yes. Capture that, put it in. And that's sort of the piece too of it's on the one hand, the systemizing of it, it's organized. Yep. So there's a process and it's much faster, but it's also, that is one of the pieces, relevant new illustrations and examples that bring it to life will also make your content stand out from the crowd, not regurgitated. And it's so not that hard, because if you have, I mean, it's hard, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work that goes into it. I don't know that. But it's like, you can make it easier by saying, these are our 25 and 25, and let's just grab the top 10. And really that's all we're going to go through. And I've got 10 tabs open, and I know what I'm hunting for is paid social. Okay, I'm going to go to their Facebook pages. I'm going to scan real quick through their ads library. What's one that I really like? Let's click on that, find out what the landing page is. Can I create a 3-panel illustration going from ad to landing page to checkout? Boom, I got a tactic illustrated right there. And then I just do that with a different one and a different one. What are the different nuances that take place in each one of those? So I'm building out this really tactical, illustration heavy version of not only all the data you get at the top, but the actual text at the bottom. So it's happening at the same time, the research and the planning that goes into it. I think that might kind of hit what you were just talking about.
I think so. And if I'm to recap that properly, right, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but what we're looking at is starting with a framework, right? And like at least this is from my perspective, right? You're starting with a framework. That framework will include something like, here's the problem, right? It's worse than you thought. Here are some tactical like things that you can actually do. And we're working on a piece right now where it's exactly this, right? It's not just, hey, here's the landscape and then call it a day. It's like, here's the landscape and now here's what you can actually do about it, right? And then making it stand out even further by creating illustrations and doing, making it sort of a little bit more. And what I think is interesting about this approach, right? Does that sound, am I in the right sort of realm there? Okay, cool.
That's it. Yeah.
And then what I think is interesting about this approach, right? And some people, I'm not a planner, I'm a pantser when it comes to creating this, right? I'm not the type of person who's like frameworks or anything like that. But what is useful about that, and something I'm trying to convert myself to, is having that framework allows you to operate at scale a little bit more, and it becomes something that's a lot more reliable, both from the creation standpoint, right? Because you're very prolific as a writer, but also from a consumption standpoint, because I kind of already have an idea. Like I already know, I'm familiar with the packaging, even if I'm not totally familiar with the content itself. Right?
Dude, no, oh my gosh, on both fronts. First of all, I love the fact that you think I'm prolific, because I feel like I'm straight up not. And Common Thread Collective is not. You should, like, it's sad how little new content we publish on our blog in particular. What we don't do is let a piece just go out and then not visit it again.
Right.
We'll ride that mofo till the wheels fall off. And I mean that on distributing through social, across channels, all of the assets we create becoming standalone assets. And then I also mean going back at least once a year, sometimes twice a year, to our top performing posts and just giving them a fresh coat of paint. And like for January, we're working on a few new pieces for January, but the bulk of our January traffic is going to come from articles that we updated at the end of 2021 and at the start of 2020. And it's those little refreshes. And Google, for some reason, loses its mind with an actual fresh pub date and marginal changes to the content on the page itself. Google is just rewarding us like mad right now for refreshed content. It's wild. In fact, it's so wild that it's tempting to just throw a new date on that, and a fresh, like a new date in the headline from 21 to 22, and like literally put a new published date on it. It's tempting.
Have you checked out Clickflow?
No, I've never. No.
Oh, okay. So Clickflow is this amazing tool. I'm going to link to it, and I'll send you my link. Where it will give you a content decay report is like the major thing that it does, where it shows you pieces on your blog that have been decaying over time. And then, so that gives you an ideal target list of like, hey, what are we going to refresh next? But then the other thing that's built in, they have a tool that's very similar to ClearScope. But then the other part that I really enjoy is the A/B testing tool that they have for title tags. So you can A/B test your title tags in the SERP, right? It's time-based. So you can see what performs better and what doesn't, and A/B test your titles and your metas.
That is so interesting. I'm also, reports. This is going to get us way off track. I'm increasingly suspect of the SERP A/B testing tools, because Google has moved into a phase of like, I just do what I want.
Yeah.
I don't care what your actual title is or your H1. Like, dude, the goofiest things especially show up in meta descriptions.
It's true.
It's so hard to actually control. But that being said, like, yeah, the decay thing, so good. Yeah. So good. When you see a piece slipping, don't put out anything new, especially if you're on a limited capacity, right? If you're not a big player with a huge budget, you'll get so much more bang for your buck by simply, like, if you, like, Don't take the lessons we're going to walk through and make something new. Take the lessons we're going to walk through right now and go apply it to something that's like bottom of page 1 or middle of page 2.
Yeah.
Or something that's slipped over the last 6 months, right?
Yeah.
Do that. Literally put a new pub date on it. Whether you're in WordPress, Shopify CMS, don't just put like an update on it. Change the publish date. Submit it through Google Search Console. That's a little extra step I do to kind of juice it. Google Search Console, inspect URL, request indexing. And if we have time at the end, I'll show you how obsessive I am on my Google Analytics, my GA on my mobile app. It's looking crazy what's going on right now on our site.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, and I actually just did this recently for a client and pointed a whole bunch of more internal links to it than ever was before this particular piece, and saw we pointed 100 internal links to this thing, and then in less than a month we just saw the organic traffic. It was like this, and then it went boom, Dude, in one day it just skyrocketed.
Look at you saying the thing I should have said. I think I'm Mr. SEO. Can internal links with strong anchor text? Banger.
Yeah.
Banger
yeah, we did it. We did it with 100 pages, and then it was just all pointing to the super hyperwriter page. We went from rank I want to say 80 initially, and then it went to 20, and then it went down a little bit, and then it went. It's now the TLDR is it's now position 5 for we pushed down 2 major competitors in that space, which is incredible especially for the brand. Cool. All right, we are a little into we're cutting into our time here. I want to look at what your pregame process looks like, and we're going to get into the live edit now. This is really where this show is going to shine, and what separates it from a lot of other things. Let's start with the outline process. Let me see what that outline looks like. Then we're going to go into the edit itself, and then we'll kind of walk through what happens after that. So if you want to pull your screen up, we'll take it from there.
All right. You can all see now the CTC article template.
Yep.
Excellent. Okay. So we break our process down, whether it's an internal team member writing or an outside freelancer, in essentially 4 stages: outline, draft, final, and then 4 CTC, which is sort of the final is what that's all about. And then we color code it inside, and we're going to give you this, right? Tommy's going to send this out to everybody. You can just literally you can have this exact thing, what I'm going to show you and walk through. So we break it into 4 stages. That's all mapped then to an Asana task with all the subtasks associated with it. So incredibly organized on the creation process itself. For every piece, damn near every piece, I want to have 2 primary keywords that are closely related. And we use this as our starting point, our template, every single time, where I want to know what is the phrase, the cost per click, and the volume on that. And then typically I'll balance it with either high CPC, middling volume, and then I flip it for the secondary keyword phrase, or it's the opposite of let's start with the really high volume, low CPC, and then let's find a middling to low volume with a high CPC on that. And then we enter in our secondary keywords up to 10, just so we've got a list. And if we have time, I'll show you our massive sheet of how we track all of that. We generate a keywords report using clear scope, and that's going to tell us what are the primary keywords we need to have in places like the headings, H1, H2, H3, etc., as well as the important terms that we need to make sure that we include in the article. Then we also, in every single one of these, as we find new resources internally, for example, admission tools and training. Admission is our paid community for all things e-commerce. People that really can't afford Common Thread Collective as an agency, that's where they go to learn how to do media buying and finance. There's an agency and freelancer channel. It's a really robust Slack community, but they do weekly trainings and they catalog them in this library behind the scenes. And we always force ourselves to do that step in the process. If you have any sort of existing internal materials, consolidate them, or at least create a central repository you and your team can have really easy access to, because we never want to make something new if we can use something that's already been created. That's a big one. We've got a collection of resources, research reports, and then these two are very interesting for us as well. We try to keep a really close eye on who are our current clients, so that when we go in to do that illustration or example hunting that I was talking about before, not only do we have like the list of 25 and 25, we've also got, let's go to our own people first. And it's not going to be heavy handed. It's just like, that's who we want to use and highlight. And it just so happens like 75% of all the illustrations you'll see on Common Thread Collective are by Common Thread Collective clients. We get into some of the technical stuff here. And I want to jump right over the top of like, let's get the slug in there, the meta description, who's the author going to be, URLs to consolidate and redirect, because we want one page per keyword. And if anything is competing against that, when the new piece goes live, we're killing it and redirecting it, one. And then we've got this here where we'll add at least 5 interlinks. The actual pages we want, just like you were mentioning, Tom, you did that with like 100. We want to do this 5 every single time. So we force ourselves to enter those URLs there. All right, we get down to, I'll jump over the content upgrade, links. We link our design assets. A lot of this is just about, hey, let's make it.
No. Don't skip over that. Don't skip over that. Go back up to the content upgrades. Let's talk about that.
Okay. Content upgrade. Let's see here. Let's go. Do you see my screen still?
Yeah.
Let's see how much.
Let's assume we know what the content upgrade is, but what I love about this part of your process is that you're deciding early on and not retroactively. Oh, hey, we should put this in there.
Yeah. You're selecting, and this is for final. That's what's important, right? You're not going to, during the outline of the draft, decide what the actual content upgrade should be. But by the time you're doing your final draft, that's when you're deciding. You've got the basic types, and then we want to pregame with the headline and the subhead, so that it'll turn into something like, and this is just my little flex, right? Beauty industry. Look at that. Nuts, right? Nuts. This is stupid. We shouldn't rank for that. So we go here, and this will be the content upgrade where headline, subhead. All right? So it's right there, and we just, every single piece that we might need is in here. We link to it, and then, okay. So this is the process then for the outlining that I walk through. Is during the draft, not during the outline, they're going to identify the problem, as I mentioned, the agitation, and the solution. And these are in every single one of them, where sentence or paragraph, short, punchy, slip and slide sentences. I'm going to open that piece so that it is effortless to go from the headline to the first line, to the second line, to the second paragraph, slip and slide sentences. Just aiming for identification, that nod, the intellectual agreement where they go, yep, that's totally a problem. Now, how are we going to agitate it, ramp it up, and make it really bad? And the reason I don't have anybody do this in the actual outline, they do it during the draft, and in fact, they do it at the end of the draft, is because you don't know what the problem agitation is until you've done your research. And you've actually come up with, we do the thesis during the outline, where I want every single time a single sentence answer to the problem. All right. Now this is going to get massaged and reworked and updated, and it's open to change, but I want to know where you're headed, because if you don't know where you're headed, your reader and the end product isn't going to have any idea. We almost always include a table of contents at the start. And here, use your solution to lead into the table of contents, right? Where you copy and paste your H2s during the final version. For example, to get there, we'll explore the 5 steps of whatever the keyword is, and then these are the steps or how it's broken down. Little extras here. This is some good stuff. This is some good stuff. Number of H2s, 3, 5, 10, or greater than 10. People think, this is where you were talking about not only do people who have read any of our industry reports, like no one is going to pick up on the fact that they're all broken down into three sections.
Right.
But people naturally, the rule of 3, can love 30 Rock. 30 Rock is, and they're just like the exemplars of the rule of 3. 5 and 10 are other good numbers. I never want to see a 4-point article or a 7-point article. But once you pass 10, you can do things like 17-point checklist. Okay, that sounds like an exact number kind of thing. Want to make it easy. Also, this is really important. Patterns. I love patterns, especially in the H's. So maybe we'll do questions, the who, what, why, when, where, and how of whatever the topic is. Or lead them all with verbs, right? Develop, grow, organize, launch. Right? We're going to come up with a pattern or participles, organizing, launching, developing. Right? We want to create these patterns to make it very easy for someone to keep reading. That's why the introduction is so important. Slip and slide, and then once they hit that table of contents, there's a recognizable pattern, not only in the number of points, but in question verbs or participles. And we even get as weird as equal length or ascending or descending length. And let me give you like the nerdiest example of this. This is our style guide. Yep. And this was not on accident, right? It's like this staircase. It's a visual effect that draws me in, and it feels balanced, it feels complete, or they're all the same, or they all go from long to short. There's this symmetry and like there's an aesthetic to it that really matters, right?
I want to stop there too, because or you just kind of jump in there for a second. What I think is great about this and what we don't give a lot of credit to is that aesthetic, right? Because I know, just because of the heat map data research and my own personal behavior, I'm not gonna look. You want to write that what John Morrow will call, you said slip and slide, and what John Morrow calls sweater knit copy. You want to get people into these pieces and hang on to every word. But the reality is that people are going to get there and scroll, right? And they're going to see what's there. And if you are able to get that, an aesthetically pleasing version of that, you're leading with the verbs or the participle, like you're showing people as they're scrolling, hey, this is what this piece is about, and you're making it very simple, then it's much easier to get them to hook into the middle of the piece or into the beginning of the piece or whatever, and make them want to go further up or further down. It's like watching, I liken everything to TV shows, right? Or movies and film, because that's my original background. And it's like when you watch a show or when you pick up a show in the middle of the season and you're like, what happened before this? This gives you those opportunities to do that, because you are constantly just sort of scanning and then going, like you're channel surfing as you go through, and then you're like, oh, this is, and then you go back.
The way I used to describe it when I taught, I taught college as well, speech primarily. And what I used to describe it as the, the problem is we're hungry. And the solution is, let's go get ice cream. And everybody goes, yeah, let's ditch class and go get ice cream. That's great. Kind of lame the professor's taking us, but whatever, let's do it. So we walk out to the parking lot, and I slowly fall behind you. And can you see me? I need like a visual. And I slowly fall behind you, and I pull a sock full of nickels out, and I smash you over the back of the head, and I put you in the trunk, and we go whipping around across, turns and railroad tracks. And I finally get to Dairy Queen, and I pop in the trunk, and I say, all right, we are here. We've arrived at our thesis, our destination, our solution. We're going to get ice cream now. And that's the experience that when I don't know what's going on as a reader, I don't care where we're going. I don't want to go for a trunk ride. And that's the real gift of doing these things that are not only slip and slide in the introduction, but a really clear table of contents where I can choose where I want to go, and I know how we're going to get where we're going. I've got the roadmap. I'm right next to you. I'm right there. I'm not in the trunk.
Right. Remind me never to go to ice cream with you. I'll never trust you now. All right, let's blow through this a little bit. Let's keep going through this, and then I want to get into the edit itself.
Yeah. So the rest of this is simply set everybody up for success. We give it's all templatized AF, including right down to the headings and how we use H6 for block quotes because they're formatted a special way on the site. All right. So let's look at what something like V1 might be. And so you can see, none of this is filled in because that's not part of the outline. This is a piece that Taylor Holiday, my boss, and Luke Austin, who is a growth guide here at Common Thread Collective, both wicked smart, both really into NFTs and Web3, et cetera, et cetera. I came into this so super freaking cold. So the very first thing that Luke had to do was identify what's the problem. The last 12 months have created extreme margin pressure for D2C e-commerce businesses from many directions. Okay. Now, right away, right, this is actually it. This is the problem. right? And you're going to see this when we move into the introduction and the further versions of this draft, right? If you're dear writer, dear editor right now, right? It's got to be that simple. What's the problem? The last 12 months have created extreme margin pressure for D2C e-commerce businesses from many directions. Now, it ain't that great of a sentence. It doesn't really sparkle. It's not too exciting, but it's a fundamental, yep, everybody in my audience goes, hell yeah, it has. Okay, yes, let's keep going. And then we unpack it. So this right here, brands are experiencing heightened customer acquisition costs, CAC, we talked about before, increased COGS, cost of goods sold, and product delivery costs, supply chain constraints and limitations that have made it very difficult to inventory plan and have the right product in stock at the right time. Okay, pretty wordy. That's what I'm thinking to myself here. I still really like just this as my problem. We're starting to get into agitation, but it still reads like a problem. You know what I mean? There's not a lot of like, it's not very scary language. I want it to be scarier, or at least more slip and slide. More slip and slide. In an attempt to combat these constantly increasing margin pressures and operational complexities, brands are urgently searching for strategies to acquire new customers efficiently and realize more revenue from their owned audiences to protect the profitability of their businesses. Whew. Sorry, Luke. I had to do it like that. I hope you don't watch this. All right. Woo! I hit this. That's a doozy. Big blocks of text are scary. Now, if this was halfway through a piece, towards the end, fine. My reader has invested, and by then I've earned the right to force them through 1, 2, 3, 4, damn near 5 lines of text. In the introduction, no. And that's what the problem agitation solution is, right? It's the introduction. It's just broken down into its component parts. So we've got a massive, let's get at the heart of the problem itself. Okay. Agitation. Unfortunately, the promise of channel diversification as a means of more efficient customer acquisition through emerging ad platforms like TikTok and Snapchat is not proving to reap better results than Facebook and Instagram, and the supply chain issues have all but sorted out. Later on, the reality that many businesses forecasted their goals based on year-over-year targets, but are having a very difficult time replicating or exceeding those numbers. And I don't even keep going, right? You get the problem, right? Mr. Walker?
Oh, yeah.
Whew, right? Okay.
Yeah.
It's not that it isn't true. It's just, wow, that's
a very long sentence.
Yeah. So we have asked this. Let's get into the solution. We have asked the same question over these past months, trying to understand if this is just an interesting cultural craze or if it is an unimportant technology breakthrough or an important for D2C e-commerce businesses, and have come to the conclusion that we believe, okay, this is such a great one, right? Do you see how this is so good? How couched in conditions this thesis is, right? And I understand that, especially for if you're a new writer or if you're even an experienced writer, you're writing in a complex topic, or you're writing to a really smart audience. And we write to a really smart audience at CTC. That you want to give them all the nuance in the world, right? Fine. It's kind of like thinking about Twitter or social media. You come out swinging with your first tweet. The first tweet is not for nuance. Comments, body of the article, that's where nuance lives. Right? It's almost like one of the other ways I like to think about it is not just problem agitation solution, but how do I make this person either so scared they can't help but keep reading, so in love they can't help but keep reading, or so mad they can't help but go talk shit about this piece in the introduction. Like, it's gotta spike one of those, right? But we believe, what do we believe? Oh my goodness. We believe margin innovation is the key opportunity, that Web3 will brands that are in a position to capitalize on it, and the immediate opportunity for margin innovation, there it is again. Okay, so I know what the big idea is trying to be, will be realized through 3 main applications: margin padding, CCC inversion, cash conversion cycle inversion, and even when I explain that acronym to you, it still probably doesn't make any sense. Cash conversion cycle inversion, and VRE as an acquisition channel, virtual real estate as an acquisition channel. Okay, so we got all the component parts we need. for this problem and chase solution, what we have to do is start whittling it down. Now, once we hit the body of it, we haven't filled in any of these yet, but if you were to look at an outline that I provide early on, as I was doing okay, what's this piece all about? How's it going to rank? What's the best way to help somebody through it? Like, we got to open with the definitions of all of these what is questions. Okay, so that naturally immediately lends itself to, this is going to be a question and answer article. That's how we're going to structure the piece. The what definitions, let me just drop all those in, a little bit of instructions along the way. Who, examples. What, who, what are examples to bring this to life so somebody can see it in real? And we just drop in at the first, there's like 10 or so. We just do a little bit of research, figure out what are interesting e-commerce brands that are doing with NFTs. Google's our really good friend. Taylor and Luke are both super into this, so they were quick on the draw for pulling up examples. And if I didn't have any of that, I would just go to Twitter and start asking there on Facebook, LinkedIn as well. People love sharing about the things they've seen or that they're promoting for themselves. All right, so what, who, let's get down to how, the applications. And in the end, as this developed, this turned into why applications, and then how will eventually appear below, because that's where it ends without any practical application. So we want to use this question format to structure it. And it's really like, that's why it goes right back to just this simple advice of looking for the patterns that we can use, or questions, verbs, participles. Find an organizing principle to it. And that's what we did here with those different kind of questions. And that's really then what formed the outline. And now the person I would either normally assign this to as a freelancer, someone on the team, in this case, Luke and Taylor, have to go and plug all their content into, right? Let me stop there and unpack any of that, or right into the next phase.
Yeah, let's jump right into the next phase. But while you're loading that up, something that someone said, Kate here said, wow, all the acronyms. Acronyms are an interesting thing, right? And we talked about this in one of the last episodes that we were on, especially with Tracy Wallace, is that acronyms are interesting because it depends on your audience, and it's always audience contextual. Now, the Common Thread Collective audience very much knows what all of these acronyms are. As a reader, I might not. Right. And when you're editing, you have to sort of take that balance of what are those two. Aaron, talk about that real quick, and then let's jump right back in.
They don't. And the second I stop defining CAC, the first time it's used in an article, is when I've lost touch. Right. Now, CAC is one where, yes, it's so close to assuming people know what it means. But it's so funny. The further I get into a new audience, like, for example, we're working with a lot of legacy brands that are turning direct to consumer e-commerce for the first time. They're waking up, and it's staggering the amount of e-commerce and digital ignorance, right? That really big brands and the people on their teams have. And so every time I kind of crack into a new audience, I realize, no, I got to stop making assumptions. So now there's the other side of that is, if I'm writing a piece that's for pure play D2C e-commerce above 10 million, above 25 million, then those acronyms start becoming almost like gatekeepers of, it's fine. If I lost you, no worries. This piece wasn't intended for you either. So it's walking that line that's really important.
Right. And depending on that audience too, I always say, like, sometimes your ignorance as an editor is your superpower, because if you're the first reader, and if you don't understand these things as you're trying to define these terms, it's like, okay, cool, what is this? Because you disengage immediately from the piece. And as the first reader, when you're the editor, that's something that you have to really kind of always have that balance on.
So we jump over here to the piece we're editing, and we've got another final version of it as well. But we'll probably end with this one because we're right up against it. I will show you what this is from the further piece of whenever someone gives a headline, I'm always like 5 long headlines to start playing around with. And good old Luke Austin here gave me 8. There's the headline. The trick with headlines is just throw as many as you can up against the wall. The only reason we landed on this one is we've got our keywords here at the front. Okay, 5 definitions, 11 examples. Maybe we take that back to 10, but once we're past 10, I don't mind odd-looking numbers. It sounds like there's a special reason we did 11. There's just something silly about that. I'm like, 5 definitions, 11 examples. Man, this might be a little too long. We might do something like, because this is still a work in progress, and plus why their margin is your opportunity. Maybe, but the how is pretty important as well. So I got to keep massaging this. Or maybe I do something like this and exactly how, because that's a big part of this piece itself. Is it's got all these pieces: the definitions, the examples, the why, and the how is a big deal. So I'm just going to keep editing and playing with this over and over again, just to get it down into probably these 4 lines right here. And it's formatted pretty on the front end, so long headlines. I've just never had any problem with long headlines. Nobody's slowed their roll. This was V1. And what V1 typically is just grab your problem agitation solution, slam it into paragraph text. That's all it comes down to. Well, what we want to identify in here is this whole idea of extreme margin pressure. Where's that margin pressure coming from? That's what I'm looking for. And it's coming from heightened customer acquisition costs, COGS, product delivery, supply chain. Okay, that's the problem we want to identify and then agitate. Channel diversification is another one, but boy, we can cover this later in the piece. And then we transition into looking across industries over the same period. You see countless news headlines and tweets cataloging the rapid growth of NFTs. All right. So this was sort of like V1. Look at how, all right, this was V1 of the introduction. And job number 1 there was pare back, cut. And we got it down to the last 12 months have created extreme margin pressure for D2C e-commerce businesses. And then we started playing around with this whole idea of how could we take those long sentences of all the different challenges and just make them more conversational and easy to digest, right? So this sounds, when you read it out loud, customer acquisition costs, up. Production and labor, also up. Delivery, warehousing, and fulfillment, you know the answer. That's it. These 2 right here, I don't even tell you how long it freaking took me. And I'll show you there's one more version of this as well. How long this freaking took us from these like opening, just pare it down. Right? And I can show you even one further step. So this is one even more where this whole thing of the last 12 months, true statement, but we got to be able to hook them with the introduction. So from every side, the pressure mounts. All right, now it's agitate. Competition, up. Customer acquisition costs, up. Production and labor, also up. Delivery, warehousing, and fulfillment, you know the answer. Perhaps painfully so. The last year has squeezed e-commerce margins in wave after wave, but that's not the only source of pressure. This is like, we're covering so much here to get in the pressures mounting. This is what it's mounting from. Empathy, you know the answer, perhaps painfully so. The last year is squeezed, but that's not the only source of pressure. So we're revisiting this metaphor. If the pressure is mounting, that's not the only source of pressure.
What hell is your reader in?
What's that?
What hell is your reader in?
Yeah, and they're in this. Right? That's the thing. They're in this margin pressure hell, but they're also in, at the same time, countless headlines barrage you with the rapid growth of cryptocurrencies and NFTs, story after story, tweet after tweet of new players and digital assets selling for millions. Insult to injury. Rock meets hard place, especially for time-strapped owners, operators, and marketers left wondering.
I'm going to jump in right there. That's your agitation. It like literally agitation, insult to injury, agitation.
And it's identification with the pressure mounting. And you're right. If these people are, I feel it. I felt the pressure of like, I got to figure out a whole new thing. Really? Damn it. Okay, fine. So it's, if I feel it, I imagine my reader is going to be feeling it. And then they're left wondering, and this QQT is our little code for, we're going to italicize this and sort of drop it in with like a line on the side so it pops out so someone can jump to it very easily. Where's my place in the craze? Am I doomed to constantly struggle? Am I already too late? Good news, you're not. However, seizing the moment demands answering 5 questions and taking action right now. Solution, you're not. However,
in the intro,
seizing them, right? Just, and then we've got our what? 5 definitions for late arrivals. Who? 11 examples of e-commerce NFTs. Why? 5 marginal benefits to your mix. How? Step by step plus exclusive access. When? Spoiler, the answer isn't later. And the reason I went with the 5th one, when, this is just the conclusion. That's all this is, but I'm a slave to my 5. It's got to be 5. I don't want 4. I want 5. Right? So we're going to end, right? And you can already see this is gaming for, we're going to end with the CTA, with the call to action. Right? And it's sort of building from, what do you need to know the background of? What are the examples of it looks like? The benefits of doing it. Here's the step-by-step plus exclusive access. Oh, what's that? Really? Okay. When are you going to... A little bit of tantalizing, and then just building to the conclusion here. Right. Now, you want me to stop screen sharing? Man, I know you've been so great.
Yeah, I just realized this hour flew by awfully fast. Yeah, if you can, I'll close the video there. Yeah, we could go all the way through this piece all day long. Anyways, I'm gonna be so. I would love to have just sort of wrap this up for me. In conclusion, what you're looking for when you're editing a piece. Let's give that little soundbite there. And then what are you giving away to the audience today? We'll talk about that.
Oh, all right. So for my bring it all back together. When I'm editing a piece, I am looking for a slip and slide introduction that addresses an actual pain and promises a solution. You give me that, I'm down. I'm looking for a clear structure in the body that follows recognizable patterns, especially in the subheadings, and includes major keywords we need to cover. And then third, I'm looking for an opportunity to have the reader take action, the viewer take action that involves them giving me their information. So I'm building to that throughout the entire piece. And that's the 3-part breakdown of what goes into a piece of written content anyway. Introduction, body, conclusion.
I love it. All right. And we will be, as we're following up with the show, we are going to definitely be sending out the template that Aaron had shared earlier. Is there something else that you wanted to give away to the audience today, Aaron?
Yeah, man, let's send them free access to, I made just, when do you make them sign up for it? An SEO checklist that is just the most basic, long form version of it plus short form. It doesn't even exist anywhere online. It's just a doc that I've made that eventually I'm going to sell and charge people money for. I totally am, but I haven't figured out how to do that yet. So we'll send that off to your folks too for hanging out so long.
Fantastic. Wonderful. We're going to wrap it up here. I am going to, anyone who's willing to give some feedback afterwards, I'm going to change the link in the call to action here. I'd love to get your feedback on what you thought about the show, anything that we could do to improve and make things better in the future. Your feedback. All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching. Aaron, thank you so much for coming on. And we'll be sending out the recording and everything else afterwards. Have a great rest of the day.